whichever direction I look, there's some cause, there's some charity, some plea for people to volunteer. And on the other side, it's obvious that many people have this desire to help or an ache to make a difference and somehow be the better for it. It seems like as long as our basic needs are taken care of, as long as our survival is not at stake, then we're pretty willing to lay a helping hand. But between this as an idea and actually doing something, not just reactively, but proactively, there seems to be a psychological barrier that keeps a lot of people from ever lifting a finger. I mean, we can live just fine with good ideas left confined to our heads just as words and without having to ever put it into practice. And if someone indeed actually has it, this ache to contribute, or this feeling of a lack of something because they're not contributing to a cause that's bigger than just themselves, there's a feeling, or maybe there is no feeling, an appreciation to the idea of being a part of a community. So, for example, a community where people feel interconnected, and so that everyone feels needed and encouraged to share. You can't really basically get this kind of satisfaction by doing anything on your own. I mean, as much as we might think we're independent, it's really an illusion. And the fact is, we're built to work together. But the fact also is, we're conditioned to be the way we are. And you can't really expect to break this sort of conditioning so easily, because being this way is based on a big habit that's supported by 1,000 little habits. And the only way to change ourselves is to truly act against our nature by trying something completely new that at first we'll probably be indifferent to, maybe even negative, or we'll feel bored really soon and want to get back to our usual routine. But all of this relates again to this psychological barrier. And what we're unconscious about most is what's behind this barrier and why real change is actually so hard and sometimes almost impossible if you're not really aware of what's really going on. The only way to see a barrier in this case, the ones I'm talking about right now so ambiguously, is by acting against it. And I can show how this happens by sharing the idea of a time bank and by sharing the story of the one we launched in the UAE about 2 years ago called Time Dirham. So a time bank basically takes hours of time and turns it into a currency. So for example, 1 time dirham is equal to 1 hour of time that you either earn by helping someone else out, or it's spent by having someone help you. And the idea behind it is basically that everyone has something to contribute, some skill or service that can make a difference to another person in the community. And so Time Dirham provides us with opportunities to do that, because usually our capacity to share is mostly connected and so limited to money, opportunities to make money. Money is time. Time is not time. Effort is money. It gets confusing. And so Time Dirham provides us with opportunities to share what we know and can do in a way that is not connected and so limited in this way. This is how it works. Basically, this illustration and all these cool images that you see right now, they were developed by a Gulf News illustrator that I don't know his name, but I thank him now. And basically, this illustration is called The Circle of Giving, where at the top, first you see Jason. He lets his time bank know what he has to offer, what skills or services he wants to provide for other people if they have a need for it, as well as what he would like to receive. To the right, Tim discovers that Jason, for example, can help him develop his website. So they arrange to meet, and Jason spends 3 hours of his time, which earns him 3 time dirhams. So now he has 3 hours of help credited to him on his account, statement every month, everything, that he can receive from other people in the community, be it getting lessons to play the guitar, or having his laptop replaced, or help with his accounting, you name it, and so on around this circle of giving and receiving. This illustration was in Gulf News again, and the main reason for it being this way is that one guy is a critic and one guy is basically saying, hey, come on, man, chill out. Time is time, community, kind of like a hippie personality. I don't know why he's wearing a martial art suit. But the criticism there is quite valid. I mean, it kind of seems like Time Dirham is encroaching on money's space here, money's turf. But it's not supposed to do that. It's about filling your free time with just a new way to participate and contribute to your community. But it's about your free time, not about necessarily replacing all cash exchanges with Time Dirham exchanges like some communism, tactic. It's just about whatever free time you have, this is your choice. You could even, sometimes if you wish, replace some cash exchanges. Let's say a single mother, maybe there's just a little bit tight budget. She would love to do this extra thing for her child. There's people who can do piano lessons on Time Dirham. There's people who can tutor the child through Time Dirham. It doesn't have any cost to it. So do they have to sacrifice that opportunity just because there's a financial constraint? That's just one example. So we basically register about 400 members. More, in fact, than most time banks around the world. We even received a lot of initial press. Wait for it, it's failure. So we even got some initial interest from the press. People like you, they just love it in the beginning. It's novel. Influential people were even there, and they wanted to give support because they thought it was worth a try. Let's do this experiment. It just doesn't stick for all sorts of reasons that could easily fill up an entire book, and time banking in the UAE has been a failure. Full stop. For all sorts of reasons. But the best part about that failure provided us with plenty of material to study the barriers that make it exactly that, a failure in this circumstance. And so we stumbled upon one particular idea that revealed everything else to us. The medium is the message is a phrase coined by Marshall McLuhan, which basically means that there are forms like this glass, and there's content like the water inside the glass that is literally shaped by it. The idea here is to keep two separate things here in mind, okay? Keep them separate. The form or the medium has an effect on the content that we usually never even suspect to be there. We just take it for granted. So we take the content just as it is without realizing that there are certain biases and prejudices that taint the nature of it in a certain way. So for example, I know this is not you, but we're here at TEDxAlAin, and the event itself is the form, and my talking to you right now is the content. What we usually do is mix the two things together, and we forget all about the content, forget all about the form. So what does the form do to you just by itself? Because we're mixing them together, we're not clearly aware of what we're doing. You guys are all seated in the same direction, trying to be receptive, quiet, giving me all of your undivided attention, except for those playing with their smartphones and sleeping, and possibly daydreaming about something else. But anyway, what effect does sitting here in this context have on you right now? How does it bias the whole experience of hearing my ideas? Whatever the effects are, it's important to understand that only the mediums in your life that are repeated day after day have a near permanent effect on you that lasts and sticks. This is why, for example, after today, a lot of you will feel quite emotional about all the ideas you've been exposed to. And these feelings may even last for a few days, but then they'll begin to fade away, inevitably. And so it hasn't taken root in you, and at the end of the day, it's a temporary effect because it's a temporary medium in your life. And so our actions through mediums just by themselves have an effect on us. If we're not aware of what these effects are because all our attention is distracted elsewhere, and usually on the content alone, we're not paying attention to what happens to us when we use money, for example, or when we use Time Dirham, or when we're watching television, or when we're sitting in neatly arranged seats listening to someone talk about some idea. Dr. Al-Shamsi, not sure if he's here anymore, but he basically brought up an idea that education is associated with boredom, and yet, from my understanding of Latin, education's root word is quite more vivid than that. It's a process, it's a huge idea. But what happens is we associate education with 3 or 4 or 5 maximum different mediums that we have gotten used to institutionalizing as education in form. This is it. That's all it is. I encourage you guys to check out afterwards the Waldorf schools, experimental education, all sorts of different things. What if one guy likes to be kinesthetically taught something, another one auditory, another one visual? Maybe someone does a combination of two, the other one does. And what if the mediums of education are only really tailored for a certain type of person, and so the other ones who it's not tailored for are bored or sleeping or just playing with their smartphones or whatever it is, but it's not for them. I mean, we have to think wider. What are the forms doing to us right now? Forget just about the content. Are you being affected permanently, or is this a lasting thrill like taking an aspirin or something? Is it real? In our case with Time Dirham, we realized that with money, by acting through it every day, you're affected. I mean, you implicitly know that everyone has a different amount of it. You know that some people earn more than others, and so it sooner or later becomes all about who has more and who has less, because the more you have, the less the issue of survival matters, and you probably don't think these things, but that's hardwired into your survival genes. And this is how we end up defining the value of people by. Okay, but with time banking, of course, everyone's equal because everyone's time is equal no matter what. It's a paradigm shift, of course, much more simple and practical if you think of it in a certain way, but they can complement one another. They don't have to oppose one another. It doesn't have to be either or. It can be and. Now, if money as a medium is connected to 20, 40, or 60 hours of your week, and Time Dirham or volunteering or charity is connected to only 2 hours of your time during that week, then these other mediums are basically not taking root in you, and so they're only serving as really a Band-Aid. And the effects are basically going to always be merely temporary. Not only that, but money literally washes off whatever you were exposed to. Like whatever little traces may have been there, it's just going to be left in your thoughts as ideas and words, but it's not really in your action because only mediums make you act. Everything else is in full pause. But I don't mean to give money a bad rap here. It's just an example, purely. It's an example of a medium that so happens to conflict with Time Dirham, another medium. Acting in our heads like a barrier that keeps us from basically allowing it to stick and so be popular ever. But we miss all this and we misunderstand things because we don't look at the forms, never the mediums. And so we can't realize that it is not us, but the mediums we're exposed to that actually define what we will or won't do. Instead, we think we're just indifferent to Time Dirham or volunteering. Maybe we're even negative about them. I mean, it's not really doing anything, maybe. Or we cannot find the energy or positive emotion to get ourselves out of our seats, out of our daily routines, and go do something. Well, this is exactly what it is to pay attention only to the content, not the form. If you were to pay attention to the form, then you realize by simply acting through Time Dirham, by merely going through the motions of it, you will be affected. And if you do it repeatedly, I promise you, it will change you. It's not a selling of Time Dirham, it's a selling of mediums. If you want to be different, you have to find a medium that causes that change. You do not basically, in a vacuum of nature, just voila, because you had a happy thought. Your actions have to reflect it immediately. There's a school of thought that assumes that thoughts lead to actions. From my experience, this is a complete delusion. It's actions immediately. From the moment that you're born, you're thrown into a whirlwind of traditions that extend thousands of years back and come to our present day, and they're all about mediums. You're thrown into school, and boom, boom, boom. Little kids go through the factory, and boom, they're fashioned in a certain brand names, and you can put them all there. But it's all the medium that created them. It's not always a purely volitional thing. I mean, how far back can you remember? Usually you can remember when you had thoughts, but by the time you had thoughts, you already were exposed to so many mediums that created those thoughts. I mean, it's giving me a headache right now just thinking about it. But the truth is, whatever it is we do repeatedly ends up sticking into our thoughts and our heads and whatever we formulate in there. And by listening to these thoughts, it becomes even more likely that you'll end up doing tomorrow what it is you've been doing all last week or last month or last year. And so in any direction that you may feel, let's say, indifferent or apathy or maybe even negativity, you can be sure that in that direction, real change can be affected in you. Maybe that change is not something you want, but that's the channel of change. You have to figure out what mediums have the change that you want to be in this life. So we have to basically stop from time to time and wonder, is it us who are doing and acting and saying and thinking and feeling in this posture? Or is it the barriers inside ourselves, created by the mediums we've been always exposed to in our lives, that are doing so on our behalf without our ever realizing it, without our ever being aware of it?